everybody, welcome back to Sharon Cullen Art. I'm glad you tuned in for another video. Today, as you can see in the title, I'll be doing an unboxing and I'll be doing some swatching. Let's just jump right into it. The first thing that I wanted to show you was this brush cleaner that I got, Master's brush cleaner. Many of you are probably familiar with it. It's been a while since I had it. It's a conditioning cleaner, so it's got conditioners in it, but it comes in this little paste form, and you can just rub your brushes right on it and help clean them out that way as well. It's nice. It gets the soap into the bristles. It says rinse in warm water, swirl, brush, and compound. Work into a lather, rinse, and repeat as necessary. My brushes get pretty dirty, especially using gouache. I tend to have more necessity to clean my brushes more frequently than I did with watercolor. With watercolor, you could usually rinse and wipe, and you get most of the color off of your brush, if not all of it. But with gouache, it's a lot more complicated for whatever reason. Probably because the particles of color are larger in gouache than they are in watercolor. They're made more fine in watercolor. So that is making it more necessary for me to get my brushes clean. The next thing I want to show you is, well, first of all, my portable painter, which I've loved for many, many years, is broken. And I'm really bummed about it. I did receive it as a gift to review on my channel back when he made these. And this was the first prototype, so he gave it to me. But one of my little tabs here, this is really dirty, one of my little tabs here is lifting up. Which one is it? This one. When I open the lid, it is really bad. I keep my gouache in it, and this palette gets ultra dirty, as you can see. I try to clean it often, but it gets dirty. So I can't really use the water cups anymore. I can't rest it on my leg. I'm afraid it'll break right off. I'm trying to figure out a way that I can just put this on, but with this thing on here, you can see it's lifting up. It's not even laying flat like it should. So I either need to get another one, which I don't know if I want to pay 30 bucks for a new one, or just forget about the cups and use my own water cup, which is convenient, but I like to sit when I'm painting, so having it on my leg is also convenient. I don't know. But in the meantime, I bought another one of these palettes, and what I'm going to do is use it for my gouache. Since I've been using my gouache in pans, and I just reconstitute it frequently, I just got a cheap palette for $9, $10, and it comes with 14 half pans already in it. Then I'm going to use some larger whole pans. I think I can fit 4 in here, and I will use my most commonly used colors in a full pan, like my black, my white, my Prussian blue, and my green, because I do landscapes more than anything. So I'm going to be filling that up. But I also, and I have another one here that did have watercolor in it that I already set up in that configuration. My hands were dirty at the time, so I have some paint on there, but this is the configuration I plan to use. But I wanted to try this for a while. I love Holbein gouache, as most of you know. I use Holbein, I use M. Graham, which I like. I use Daniel Smith, and I use Winsor & Newton. And when I look at my colors, some of them are very different. For instance, my Winsor & Newton sap green looks very light like this, and I like this color. But I also like this color, and this is M. Graham's sap green. Look at the difference in the color. Even when it's dried on the side of the cap, you can see such a huge difference in color. And they are both sap green. So, what do you do? So I buy different brands quite often. And the other thing that I like to do is when I finish a color, I like to keep some of the caps. Like my M. caps are not too bad, but I don't really care for the Daniel Smith caps. I don't care for it on their watercolor either. But I have bigger caps, like the caps from Shinhan. That's another one that I use. They're professional gouache. And I like the bigger caps. They all have the same fitting, so I like to have the larger caps because they're easier to get on and off, and I don't get my hands as dirty. So this time I decided to buy the, oh, did they send me the wrong one? No, they didn't. Good. I bought the Holbein Summer Gouache set. They're more expensive than their regular colors. I think you can get an 18 color set, which is more expensive than this because it says 12. But they have all seasons, spring, summer, winter, and fall. And I liked the summer colors, so I thought I would give them a shot. And these are the colors that come in the summer set. So what I'm going to do is swatch them for you now. There's some really nice colors, but there's also another color that I bought alongside with this order today, and I will show you that too, unless I lost it. I hope it's in my coat pocket. Whew, it is in my coat pocket. This is Spectrum Violet. This is another color that I'll be adding. And I'm waiting on one more, unless I've already gotten it. I don't think I did. It's a Winsor & Newton color, and it is called Leaf Green. I use Linden Green. Is it Winsor & Newton? It might be Holbein. Let me look that up. The Leaf Green is by Holbein. And I had been buying Winsor & Newton's Linden Green, but I'm finding now that it's a little bit too yellow for me, and I like the Leaf Green for more realistic spring color. I do use the Linden Green, but it's also very close to lemon yellow. I'm sorry, I keep peeking out my window because there's beautiful birds flying by right now. I've got a red-bellied woodpecker climbing up a tree, and it's gorgeous, but it caught my eye. I'm sorry. Color, you know? So anyway, was that everything I got? I think that was just those 4 items, and I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera around, and we will get started with swatching these colors and getting them into my palette. I know some of you like to watch that. I always thought, why do you want to watch that? But some of you have asked for it, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. And I'll probably speed it up a little bit so it doesn't take too long because I'm not the neatest of artists. Let's get started. Okay. Something else I got a while back, I've had it for quite some time, is this mixing guide book. It's a painter's color diary. And it's made by HG Art Concepts. This isn't something new that I have. I've been using it. I haven't used it as much as I thought I would, but when I'm buying new colors, I think it's a good thing to have. My Daniel Smith colors, I put in their own palette. These are low and non-staining colors that I have. And then I have more low and non-staining colors. Many of these are granulating, and I wrote it all in here. So I have 12 that are non-granulating out of all of these colors. And so today what I thought I'd do is my summer palette on another thing. And this is my Stephen Quiller palette that I have. It's a round ceramic palette with 32 spots. It's a really nice palette. I don't use it as often as I should, probably because there are colors on here that I probably wouldn't use as often. But when I am painting, I seem to be using it more and more. There is another palette that I bought. I have to say that my rotating palette that I have, I'm no longer that happy with it. And I don't like the deep wells. If I could have had that size well, I wish I had bought a different size well. He kept saying, this is awfully large, this is awfully large. It's the one that Angela Fair had made for herself, and she loves it, but she's an abstract impressionist style painter and uses a lot of water and a lot of, big washes. So having that is good for her. I'm not as much that type of a painter, but anyway, that's not what this video is about. So I've got my palette here. We will go through these colors. It does contain black and white. I might just use my own black and white out of my big tubes because I like to use these size tubes in the studio. I go through it so often. Here's one that's pretty much gone out of my whites. This is Holbein, and this one is M. Graham, but I'm going to need to order white. I also have another white that I bought to try out. It's by Mia. It's their Mia Gouache. I think I have the Mia Gouache palette. These palettes are not as good quality, those little pretty ones that you see everybody using. But I do use this white for mixing and stuff, and I find it fine. So I may just use that today in this palette that I'm going to do. But I want to show you all of the colors. So let's get started here. I've also been using my Chinese brushes more, my Masters China brushes, and using them in gouache for backgrounds because of the amount of water that they hold. I find that they do work pretty well, and a lot of animation artists use them. So this has the Spectrum Violet, but this also has a violet in here, Edo Violet. We're going to see. This one looks bluer. So we'll see. I may just use the other one, but I'm going to swatch them. And this is Winsor Newton anyway, so I won't swatch it on here. Let me go ahead and set this up. Now here I am putting in a couple of drops of gum arabic in order to slow down the drying time of the paint, not only in the palette, but also as I'm painting. The advantage to having gouache in a palette and putting gum arabic in there, it helps to keep it softer and keep it from cracking as easily. On a fully sealed tight container, I would also add drops of clove oil directly into the paint and stir it in. That would help prevent mold from growing, but I'm not using a fully sealed palette, so I'm not worrying about the clove oil. Now here I did try to put the full pans in sideways in the center, but this little thing that fits inside the palette is actually smaller than the one that I have in my black palette. So I can't use them, and I had to go ahead and put half pans in. So I put them in, and they were still a little bit loose, so I decided to put some double-sided tape down and then place them into the palette. I was trying every way I could think of to try to get those, to get the full pans to fit. I was trying to bend it and everything. Then it was very loose putting it back into the palette, so I had to readjust it again and finally got it all set. I'm just writing down all of the colors in the palette, and then I'm going to swatch each color. I accidentally put in the wrong green here, which is why I removed it with the names written down. I had to put the correct color in that spot. I will be doing a painting as well in a few minutes using this palette and only the colors from this palette, just to see how it will do with the type of landscapes that I paint. It was interesting and it was a bit of an adjustment, but it is a beautiful palette. I'm just drawing in what I'll be painting very quickly, and we'll get started on that. Initially, I'm going in with that lightest green in the background. I think it's called spring green. And just putting a light wash of that down. I'm using my Master's Chinese brush, which holds more water in order to do these light washes. And then as I go along, I'm going to gradually build up the opacity of the gouache. When you do it this way, it allows you to build layers very easily. And when you put a light wash down initially, it helps to prevent the lifting back up of that color that's underneath because it seeps deeper into the paper. When artists paint with oil, they use something called the thin to fat method, where they start out with their oil paints thinned and then they gradually increase the thickness of the paint. And you do the same with gouache. You use that thin to fat method. You start out with your thinner layers and gradually build those layers as you go. If you start out with full strength paint on the bottom of your painting, then building up on top of it makes it more difficult to muddy up whatever it is you're painting by lifting up and reconstituting the paint underneath. So we build up slowly. Gradually increasing the thickness of the paint helps you to lay that paint down without lifting color up from underneath. If your brush is too wet, then you tend to lift the paint up and reconstitute it from underneath. So you want to get your paintbrush drier with each subsequent layer as well. Not dry, but drier than the previous layer. Gouache really is not hard to paint with. It took me a while to figure it out. Back when I started painting with gouache, there was no YouTube video to find on YouTube anywhere. It was very difficult to figure out how to paint with this medium without having anybody teaching it. So now you can find all sorts of people. It's become more popular again, and more people are painting with it, and it really is a lot of fun. But if you're used to painting with watercolor and then you switch to gouache, there is a little bit of a learning curve involved. You need to have more of an oil painting mentality rather than a watercolor mentality. Even though it's considered an opaque watercolor, it really is not watercolor. I have opaque watercolor palettes. My Gansai Tambi, I think that's what it's called, Gansai Tambi, and then my new Denise's Embrace Opacity set. That one is also opaque watercolor. They do not lay like gouache, so they're very different. The thing with gouache is that the particles of pigment are much thicker than with watercolor, which does not allow it to seep into the paper as easily. It wants to sit on top, whereas watercolor seeps in. When I paint with gouache, I lay down my underpainting and then I start by painting the layers in the distance and working toward the foreground of my painting, building up on those layers as I go. You can paint each individual item and not go over any other area, kind of like a paint by number. That's the only way I can describe it, where you're painting each individual area. But I tend to do more layering in my painting. I guess I do a little mix of both, but right now I am doing the tree and the leaves in the distance of that tree. But when I get down to the ground, you'll see that I'm working from the back toward the front. Technically, I should have left that tree for later, but it still works out in the end. Gouache tends to be more forgiving that way. I didn't like the color that was laid there. It was a little too yellow, so I went back in to paint another layer of color, and I will go ahead and repaint those branches later. I needed to keep that light in the background where the sun is shining down on those grasses out in the distance, but the foreground is very dark and shaded. So as I come forward, I drop into the shaded area and my plants become darker and they also become more detailed. So now I'm painting more detail into the plants. And once I'm done with those, then I can go ahead and finish the fence posts and slats that are in front of that, and then I'll go ahead and put in the foreground. There were these pretty little orange flowers off to the right, some of them on the other side of the fence and then some on this side of the fence. So I went ahead and put in some of the foreground plants that won't be involved with the fence in the super foreground, I guess you could say. But with these orange flowers, they come into the shaded area more. So I put in a darker orange red to represent that. And then the brighter orange I put in the background. Patience is the key with this type of a landscape because there's so many little minute plants, leaves, grasses. So you just have to be patient and work at it. I'm going at super speed, so it's not so boring for you to watch. But when you watch it at regular speed, it's really moving a lot slower, as you can see. This is regular speed. So this painting took me about an hour or so. And this book is a 6x9 book, so this painting is a little less than that, maybe 5.5 by 8.5. Now I've begun to mix the paint for the fence shading. It's dark in the foreground, but there is a little bit of shading on it. Shading also gives it shape so that you can tell that this wood has a shape to it. It's not just flat. And the slats to the fence were not pieces of cut wood. They were actual branches that made up these slats. So I made them kind of wiggly like a branch would be. And now I'm just putting in the closest foreground plants that are in front of that fence post and the tree. And then I think I will be all done. Please excuse the dog snoring in the background. But I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed this palette. I do like the colors. They were an adjustment for me, but they are beautiful colors to paint with for the summertime. So I think I will get a lot of use out of that palette. So remember, everybody, be courageous, paint with wild abandon, and most of all, be kind to each other. Take care. God bless you, and I will see you soon. Bye.